Want to continue, or have you finished?
In terms of my presentation, in terms of responding to comments that you had outside of, I'll just check the letter from our attorney. Talked about the fatals. We talked about, one of the other questions, and you brought up to Mr. Burke, Mr. Leonard, was this extended queue. This extended queue. And what we did, this was, I believe it was back in February of 13, and I'd have to check that. We basically put tubes across the roadway, across Randolph Ave in front of 7-Eleven, and we did that for 48 hours. So the tubes in the roadway that you run over, we had those out there for 48 hours in a row, and we never once, for any of those hours, particularly the AM or the PM peak, noticed an extended queue. And what I mean by that is that it's very easy to look at the speed data and look at the speed of the vehicles that are traversing that segment at that time, and none were below, or at a speed that you would have expected this extended queue to occur.
Okay. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Delaski?
You said 7-Eleven. You mean 7-Eleven Randolph Ave?
That's correct.
Yes, not the 7-Eleven store.
No, that's correct. 7-Eleven.
I don't know. I thought there was direct testimony on that from the police chief on the queue from St. Elizabeth's heading south on the state highway in the AM peak, no?
There was indeed. However, I looked at the data that we collected, and I couldn't find anything. And again, we were out there for 48 hours. I couldn't find anything that told a different tale other than we have prevailing speeds at that time.
So we also have data. We have a report from the police chief following up. I think it's been publicly made available. There have been 30. Well, you said that there were 4 fatalities on 28, but you didn't think that there were incidents with respect to crashes on 28, right?
So in terms of the Mass DOT crash database that I was able to access, the only thing that I could find were the intersections and not in front of particular homes.
So the chief has reported 30 individual incidents, reported innocence to the incidents that may not have all made it to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, which I know forms the basis of MassDOT's data. But nevertheless, the town's data shows 30 individual incidents between November 1st, 2012 and March 11, 2015 in the stretch of Randolph Avenue that extends between, it appears to me, between Reedsdale and Chickatobit, that stretch of Randolph, with most of it coming, a lot of it coming up at the light at the top of the hill at the church. So we should...
It's 2013.
2012
was a fatality.
I'm sorry. Okay, so it's probably 29 between January 11, 2013 and March 11, 2015. So about 26 months. Do you think that's a lot?
I'd have to go back and look at the types of crashes in terms of, are they rear-end collisions? What's happening out there?
Okay.
Was it driver error?
I think that'd be helpful to know, just to give some sense of what your thoughts are on that. Can you, another question?
Of course.
Can you talk about the mode split and what you expect? I know we talk a lot about the vehicles, and but what do you think is going to be the, particularly in the morning? How many of those 90 units do you think will be using the bus routes? What's your sense of that?
Probably less than 1%.
So negligible.
Negligible. I'd say most of the people would be using private automobile.
Would you say 100%?
I'd say pretty close.
99? Doesn't matter.
Pretty close.
The numbers are, yeah, okay. And how about walking?
Again, I'd say you're looking at a vehicle-centric development.
And on the in the AM, what's the percentage of traffic heading north?
In the AM on Randolph Avenue, the percentage or the number? I don't know what the percentage is.
The numbers are hard because it's all relative, and I know that we're talking about a relatively low number, 28, I think you said, in the most critical peak hour, maybe 8 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Somewhere in there,
Round
correct.
figures or whatever. Yeah, something like that. It's not your point is, and I think it's a good one, is that not all 90 units are getting up, brushing their teeth, getting in their car, and leaving between 8 and 9. There's a third of them, about.
That's right.
And I just think for the purpose of really understanding it, it helps to understand percentages. So of that third, how many do you think are heading north?
Well, I can tell you specifically if I can look at the report for
Yeah,
a
of
moment.
course.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I may.
The reason I ask that is, as you can tell from my questions, I asked Jim the same question. I think it's a tough thing to cross 3 lanes of traffic. And I don't think we could have done it Saturday morning, or at least I wouldn't have wanted to do it. Maybe in those limited moments. I haven't done that on a Tuesday morning, but you know, I'm sure that Chairman Leonard is about to have me do that.
Mr. Mullen, we projected approximately 27 vehicles taking a left.
27. So it's a pretty high percentage of the total.
It's when you look at the trip pattern, most people are heading towards Boston,
Okay.
and that's
All
what's
right.
reflected.
Okay. So, so almost all of the people who are leaving and entering, I guess, I gather from the corollary of that, are in a car, with the vast majority of them heading towards town.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mrs. King?
I had a couple of questions. I want to go back to, you had said there were 28 cars leaving per hour and
During the peak hour.
during the peak hours, and 27 will be turning left in the morning. But you had mentioned that there are 20 homes there today that were also taking that. I wrote it down in a way that made no sense, so I was going to ask you to perhaps go through that example again. I wasn't sure how that related.
So what I'm stating is when you look at access to this 4-lane roadway, you have approximately 20 homes plus the DPW garage access road, all daylighting or outletting onto Randolph Avenue. And what I'm stating is when you look at the way that they leave their homes or the DPW leaves the garage, if they use that access point, they're encountering that same volume today on Randolph Avenue. So if you're pulling out of your driveway, if you live in this section and you're pulling out of your driveway, you're doing something very similar to what you would be doing if you were leaving the development. So that was the analog there.
Right, I had something that like 20 cars equals 28. Maybe I wrote something strange.
So I
down.
said you have approximately 20 homes, and if we assume that 10 of them were leaving their house at the same time or during that peak hour, you have a third of what's leaving the site in the future.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. And on the dates that was, that the tubes were on Route 28?
Yes.
That was in February?
I believe it was February of 13. It was a non-school vacation week, typical weekday, which would have been Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Do you know what the weather was?
At that time, I believe it was clear. I don't think there was any snow. We typically don't put the tubes down when snow is expected because the plow operators love to go after the tubes.
I bet that would be a problem, yes.
Understood.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Delaski, let me ask you this, because I want to know how accurate your analogy of 20 houses and people going to Boston to work is when you apply it to this project. Because generally speaking, you'd have one car leaving a house on Randolph Avenue, taking a left-hand turn at an appropriate time, and safely making it onto the roadway and going forward. At the project site here, if you're going to have 27 people within this period of time, 27, 28 people, going to Boston, you're almost bound to have a queuing effect to some extent. And my question to you is, and it may not be an engineering question, it may be more of a psychological question, but is it safer for a person who has one vehicle and wants to take a left-hand turn onto Randolph Avenue to make the decision as to when to actually enter the Randolph Avenue and go forward? But if you have a backup of 2 or 3 or 4 cars all wanting to make that left-hand turn, isn't there at least, and I know you're not a psychologist, but isn't there a psychological pressure on that first car, knowing you've got 3 or 4 people behind you? They may be late for work, they may be angry, whatever. And they may give you a little toot and say, make a run for it, go for it. What are you doing? I can't get onto the roadway. Isn't that a factor here, is whether that creates a safe condition or an unsafe condition?
I'm going to defer to your driving experiences, Mr. Leonard, and let you speak to that.
But you're the traffic engineer. Don't people who are the first in a queue have some type of a psychological tendency to maybe take a greater degree of risk than they normally would coming out of one driveway with one vehicle?
Well, we were going to study it years ago, and I never did. I can do a search tomorrow and find out if there are data published on that. You make a very good point.
Doesn't it differ from the situation where a person is in their own home, their own driveway, and they want to get out, but isn't it a different situation where you have
I can't
people
speak.
behind you?
I can't speak to that with authority. Knowing pulling out of my
Well, if you
driveway.
can't do it, who can? Who studies that type of
You can.
reaction by...
You grew up in Southie. You've been a member of the Kosciuszko Circle Rotary Club your whole life. What are you talking about? You can do it.
Tomorrow around the water cooler,
I get into
I'll ask
that.
my colleagues. You can ask your colleagues and see what 10 people say.
But that's where I think there's a substantial difference between you're analogizing one person in a driveway waiting to get out on the road, as opposed to 5 or 6 people who may be queuing. And if the traffic lights, even if they're synchronized, there's always that window of opportunity, and you say, do I go for it or don't I?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the analogy that I was making was for safety rather than operations. So the analogy that I was pulling is that there are people that pull out of those driveways today along Randolph
Yeah.
Avenue. They do it very safely. They're able to execute those turns without incident. That was my analogy. My analogy was not to the operational or the stress that you're referring to.
Or to the psychological
That's right.
effect of having a queue behind you and maybe wanted to take a little more risk than you would under normal circumstances.
That's right. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, when you look at what we're projecting in terms of using historical data, you're looking at 28 vehicles, 28 people leaving this site. So if you break that down over the peak hour, they might be clustered together, but if we did an equal distribution, you're talking about one vehicle every 2 minutes. So I realize that somebody's leaving at the same time as your neighbor, and you might get 2 or 3 vehicles there. But when you look at 28 vehicles over the course of an hour, you're looking at an average distribution of one vehicle every 2 minutes.
So is your opinion, if you were able to get these 2 lights properly sequenced, as you suggest you may be able to with DPW, I don't know,
Well,
or with MassDOT,
we-
that would give you more of a window of opportunity to enter the roadway safely?
We looked at both. We looked at retiming the signals, and we talked about this back in December. We looked at retiming the signals without coordination, which is what we recommend, and we also looked at retiming the signals with coordination. And what we discovered is that your operational level of service is better, so meaning how does the intersection perform? It's better when they're uncoordinated versus having a coordinated system. Because when you think about coordination...
What's the reason for that?
The reason coordination works, and it works beautifully when you think about New York City, is you have a very heavy
Nothing
demand...
works beautifully in New York City. No.
But if you're there at 6 in the morning and you're delivering and you're going down and you catch the green wave from
Yes.
the Upper West Side all the way down through Wall Street, you're getting a green wave. That's a
You can
coordinated
go 8 or
system.
10 blocks, or
That's-
maybe more.
That's right. That's beautiful. And the reason that's beautiful
Except they
is
go 80 miles an hour to try to make it through the green lights.
don't let the chief hear you say that.
I would never, I don't go 80 miles an hour, but go ahead. I don't mean to
If
interrupt.
someone were. The reason it works beautifully is you have very low volume on your side streets.
Yep.
The challenge with the Reedsdale Pleasant Streets, or excuse me, Reedsdale Randolph Ave intersection is you've got a heavy left turn or a heavy right turn, depending on what you're looking at. So 28 going into Boston, 28 coming out of Boston. So that traffic is always moving. And so that's what makes it challenging from a coordination perspective, that you've got to have efficiency at the signal. You've got to keep traffic moving. And because you don't have that nice valve that you can shut off in the north-south direction and let the east-west go, you always have that heavy west-south movement. So to shut that off and let that back up becomes a problem from a coordination perspective. At some point, you've got to go green on the main corridor, and you've got to go red on the side streets, and vice versa. And it's very difficult to do for that Route 28 that comes down Randolph Avenue, where the right and the left are.
I asked Mr. Burke a question that I probably shouldn't have because he's not a traffic engineer, though I have great respect for Mr. Burke's general knowledge as an engineer. And that is, number one, it's my understanding that this intersection does not qualify for signalization under the MassDOT guidelines. Is that fair to say?
So under federal guidelines, it does not meet the warrants. So when you look at, if somebody called the Milton DPW and said, listen, I want to signal at this intersection, Milton Public Works has to go out and perform an analysis, and based on the projected volume from this development, it does not meet the traffic signal warrants that are set by federal guidelines.
Okay. And this is a private driveway. And is it your opinion that MassDOT could not suggest or regulate, forget suggest, could not regulate this driveway or access way by providing that during certain times of the morning, and I know you're going to say it's not necessary, but during from 7 to 9 in the morning, it's right turn only. Are they permitted to do that as part of the regulation of Randolph Avenue, or are they not permitted to do so because this is a private road?
I'm not going to comment on what they're permitted to do, but I know that it happens all the time. And what I mean by that is when you think about a private development, a big box store, when you think about a small donut chain, there are instances where those site plans or those sites outlet onto either public or state right-of-way, and there are prohibitions in terms of left turns and the like, not only for entering but also exiting vehicles. So again, I'm not sure what Mass DOT is permitted to do, but I know that when we look at what happens in the Commonwealth, I can point to half a dozen very quickly of things like that.
And I guess your testimony is you'd say that's not necessary from a public safety perspective? Is that what you're saying? Or?
When you look at everything that's out there, and I realize you have high speeds, we've talked about the high speeds, I really realize you have 4 lanes of traffic, 2 northbound, 2 southbound, but when you look at, and we're going to have a gap study done next week in terms of the available gaps, meaning are those instances long enough in between the front bumper and the rear bumper of the rear bumper and the front bumper of a leading and tailing vehicle? Do you have sufficient opportunity to pull out of that street? And based on everything we've looked at so far, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
But how do your statistics take into effect the, other than whether people crash or not, the sophistication of the driver, I'll say this, but I hate to say it, the age of the driver, whether they're driving a Volkswagen Beetle or they're driving a Ferrari. I mean, does that all get worked out in the crash statistics? So that you say, sure, the fellow with the Ferrari who's 28 years of age going into Boston because he's a stockbroker, he's going to make it many more times than what I would do in my Volkswagen Beetle if I took that risk.
So there's 2 answers there. The first answer is you're going to drive the way that your vehicle allows you to drive. So if you're driving the VW Beetle versus the Ferrari, you know that it's going to take you 10 seconds or a certain amount of time, and you're going to watch for that gap.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to have to be more cautious than somebody who thinks they're on the Formula One circuit.
That's right, and you would be. You would be, and
I should be.
That's
Shouldn't
right.
I? I mean, you don't want Ferrari drivers pulling out of this driveway, zipping onto the road at 80 miles an hour.
That's right. And when you think about this, again, and it sounds to me like, from a practical perspective, you're thinking about it where you have these vehicles, these drivers behind you. When you think about the difference between a site like this, where people are residents, versus a site that's very, I don't want to say transient, but let's say a donut shop, okay, where you're driving to work and you've got your favorite donut shop, and you might go to that donut shop or you wait for the next one because there's not an extended queue at the drive-thru. Okay, so you've got all of these donut shops that you go to, or you know what, you're in a new area. The thing about pulling out of a place where you're a resident onto a road that you know is busy and you've got high speeds, you're used to that. You've seen it all the time, you've grown accustomed to it, you realize where those vehicles need to be to allow you to join the traffic stream. If it's your first time visiting, or you're going to, again, a donut shop and it's your first time at that donut shop, you have, I'd say, less of an appreciation for approaching traffic on a busy street, and you're going to say, all right, you know what, I'm either gunning it now or I'm going to wait and I'm going to continue to wait.
This is why I'm terrified when I drive in New York traffic. Isn't that right?
Understood.
Okay. So would you say that if you, as a matter of policy, would you reduce the risk to someone being killed pulling out of this driveway would you materially increase it? So that if you said it was no left-hand turn from 7 to 9 a.m., even though it may be inconvenient for the residents to get into Boston, would that give you an enhanced safety factor over your analysis, which statistically indicates to you as a professional traffic engineer that statistically the risk is not that significant, but if there is an accident, it's going to be a whopper.
So we know historically from data that left turns are more severe than right turns. And so when you're talking about the absolute, if a left turn was restricted, does the intersection become safer? Absolutely. We know that historically.
So, but as a traffic engineer, you wouldn't recommend that. Is that true? If the town hired you as its traffic engineer rather than the applicant, wouldn't you err on the side of public safety and say, as much as it's inconvenient, maybe this whole project is inconvenient to a lot of people, I would say let's err on the side of safety. Let's eliminate a left-hand turn from 7 to 9.
So as a professional engineer, I'm doing what I would do as my role as town engineer. And that is looking at the data, looking at what we have, and looking at the fact that people execute these turns all the time from this location. I can point to places along Route 1 down in Foxborough where you've got a 4-lane roadway, speeds higher than this, and you've got relatively safe operations there. And so when I look at all of the data point to this could be a left turn and a right turn.
You agree with me that if somebody improperly executes a left-hand turn coming out of this driveway, if they misappreciate the situation, they're driving their Volkswagen Beetle, but a Ferrari is coming up the street towards them, and they misappreciate the risk, that the likelihood of a substantial personal injury or death it would be likely under that. In other words, a crash that occurs under those conditions at 7 to 9 in the morning with everyone in a rush to get to work and somebody making an improvident left-hand turn is liable to produce a serious accident that could put people's life and limb at risk. Is that true?
So in terms of having higher speeds on Randolph Avenue and having the speeds that we have out there, if a crash were to occur, the outcome would be quite severe, yes.
I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time. Mr. Mullen? Kenny? Mr. Caggiano, do you have any other witnesses?
Do not.
You do not. Okay, it's 7:35. Traffic is an important issue in this case, as everyone knows. We have an extra 20 minutes or 25 minutes, which we can fill if anyone wants to. Does anybody out there have any questions of Mr. Delaski? Just understand one thing. We're televising these proceedings so that if anyone wants to ask a question, you're going to have to come forward and sit in front of the microphone so that your questions will be recorded. And you have to tell us who you are and where you live.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joe Mullins, and I'm a resident of Highland Street, 300 Highland Street. And I was at the Conservation Commission meeting the other night, and I made some comments, and I'd like to march through some of the notes if I could. Some other people might like to speak, so I'm not going to dominate the time. I've lived here for 35 years and raised my family, my wife and I, and we're at, as I said, 300 Highland Street. I think the thing I said the other night was, and I wasn't trying to be funny, was that the emperor has no clothes. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Mullins.
I just ask you a question, Mr.
Yes.
Mullins? On the drawing that I'm looking at, there are two properties that are owned by the Mullins. There's Joseph R. Mullins, that's you. Is that right?
Yes,
And there's Charlene A. Mullins.
it's my wife.
Is that one piece of property, or are there two homes there? And
Well, I'll explain.
Oh, okay.
That
the
one that-
reason I ask is we were standing right here, and we were looking at your house on the site tour. So I think, at least in the board's mind, we have a good idea of where your house is, but I wanted to make sure that that was indeed your home.
35 years ago, we bought that house from McCuskers at 300 Highland Street. and it was 3 acres of land, essentially the same. Right next door to it, my neighbor John Morosini, who lived there for 47 years, and he lived at 298 Highland Street. And John passed away in 1997. I bought it from him. His deal fell through. He asked me to buy it, and I did. And then I tore his house down, and that's my side yard now.
Okay, fine. Thank
So
you.
the reason that's not in common ownership is
Okay.
because, as you know, they get merged if they're in the same ownership.
They do indeed.
You would know that.
I do know that.
Say no more.
So I wanted to just reinforce what I said the other night. This is 90 units being built on a 2-lot subdivision approved in 1997 for Mr. Jack O'Toole. And I was familiar with Jack O'Toole. He offered to sell me the land at the time. I turned it down because I don't build single-family houses. Full disclosure, have been a real estate developer for 50 years. And I've enjoyed living in the town, and I hope to continue to do so. Mr. Chairman, at the Eustis Estate the other night, you said something I wrote down. Everyone's entitled to peaceful, quiet enjoyment of their property. I think those are your words. I like that. I'd like to just get off of that. I don't want to make a speech, but the fire chief said at your March 31st hearing that he would anticipate maybe 3 to 5 times per week, he said. And when he came, he would bring a fire truck, a ladder truck, a pumper, a command vehicle, not to mention a police car. And he said when he arrives, nobody leaves. It's been explained as a driveway. Somebody at the Concom said it's a road. It's 24 feet. I want to get to that in a second. But basically, the fire chief said it was going to be very difficult for anybody. Nobody could leave the site. He said, no one leaves when I arrive. Let's see. I want to try to take it in order, but I'm not doing a very good job of it. It's a 4-lane state highway, and there have been more accidents, according to the police chief, on Randolph Avenue than any street, including Route 138. And of the 29 that were mentioned, I've been involved in 2 of them. One of them was at Reed Street, heading north at 5:30, waiting to make a left turn, and a lady behind me reared and hit an oncoming car heading south and totaled their cars. I was lucky, otherwise I wouldn't have been here. Heading south at 8:30 in the morning at Chickatawbut, a MBTA bus came through the intersection, hit 4 cars, and I was the 4th one. So that's within the last 2 years. So it is a very, it's a high-speed commuter route, okay? The land is 2 acres of wet and 6 acres very steep. And apparently, the engineer, Mr. Burke, done a good job of really putting a lot of units on a very tight site. He's a good engineer. I've checked him out with other engineers, so he's done a good job of that. There are retaining walls, 12-foot retaining walls, and I said the other night at the Concom, they violate the 25-foot non-disturbed zone before, during, and after construction. And during is, I guess, understandable because it's construction, but afterwards it's because of the retaining wall that's been mentioned earlier. I don't know what the consequences of that are. I mean, Mr. Caggiano has already indicated that he intends to appeal this to the Housing Appeals Committee and overrule the local bylaws. They have had a denial of an order of conditions, and I urged mistakenly at the Concom that they not waive the local bylaw, but they said that's what you folks would be able to do. So I would urge you then not to waive the wetland bylaws. There are 2 traffic lights now, Reed Street and Reedsdale Road. You can't put another one there, and it's a very dangerous road, and I'm sorry, Mr. Burke, I don't agree with you. If you got a 24-foot road and all that traffic going in, and I know you said the other night that there is turnaround, but that's a parking lot, which is the turnaround.
Would you have any questions of Mr. Delasky? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have any questions, you certainly can ask them.
No, I couldn't contend with the numbers. I'm sorry, I can't do that. But there's been a denial of the order of conditions. There is an undisturbed zone. I think Mr. Caggiano said everything that's gone to the Concom has gone to you, but I think I heard you say that you are getting plans, but no one's explaining them very well to you.
Well, I think that perhaps in the response to the neighbors who are presenting expert witnesses, using Rackham, Sawyer, and Brewster as their lawyers, which we have scheduled here for the middle of May. After that, I think Mr. Burke is going to be submitting some type of a plan or supplemental materials on the local 25-foot non-disturbance zone, which we're just not skilled in doing that. That's something that's Conservation Commission, could be Planning Board. It virtually never comes before us at the Board of Appeals. So I think we'll understand that issue properly at some point in time, but we don't at the present time.
I don't want to ramble on. I would like to reinforce what I heard Kathleen O'Donnell say at the public hearing there, that it's kind of like a castle being built in a swamp. It's a very difficult site. It's a very tight site. And it was a two-lot, single-family subdivision. And I know what 40B is all about. I know that the intention would be to go to the Housing Appeals Committee and overturn it. And they may well be able to do it. I would just urge you not to grant a waiver. And by the way, that roadway, and I was asking Bill Clark here, and I wasn't aware of it, maybe the subdivision control laws indicate or require a 14-foot roadway, 14-foot in each direction? I don't know if this is true. In local subdivision laws, at 14 and 14 is 28?
Yeah, and I think that is for a different style.
For
of
subdivision?
road. Yeah.
Yeah,
bigger
okay.
subdivision.
For road?
Right.
Okay. So therefore, that would mandate a 28-foot right-of-way. Let me just say this. As I said the other night, and I'm going to stop, okay? It seems like you're dancing through wetland to get to a site to put down an awful lot of land. I don't think you should be making a decision based on 5,000 square feet, because that violates Chapter 131 of the Wetland Act. Put a roadway in that's safe. That's all I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for your letter, Mr. Mullins.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who has any questions of Mr. Delasky, or perhaps has any questions of Mr. Jim Burke, who's here on the engineering issues? Yes, sir.
Promise to be brief.
Sure. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Mr. Leonard, as Gregory Dolan, 39 Clifton Road, dead center at the bottom and the center of Clifton Road. Between 7 and 9 a.m., when the proposed no left turn, it would be inevitable that such traffic, including Ferrari drivers and everyone else, would turn Reed, Highland, Clifton. And behind me are Francis, Michael, Travis, all Clifton Road residents, somewhat absent from the analysis, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt if they could kind of give us the details, is what the impact, tell us about your studies and what it's shown about the impact on Clifton Road.
Sure, that's an excellent question. Are you able to do that, Mr. Delasky?
Only because the inevitable, either way, with this turn, without that turn, can't help but increase what is already some rather contentious traffic, even with our own neighbors, and sure enough, gravity, I kid you not, plays a big part, so that when they get down to the center, they're going 40, 50 already. So could you tell us about what your study showed about Clifton Road? We did see the tube in the street like a year ago. I don't know if that was you or completely unrelated, or,
We haven't looked at Clifton.
thank you.
Okay. Why don't you, just for the sake of...
And the reason we haven't looked at Clifton is right now, we're assuming that we will get full access out onto Randolph Avenue, so left turns and right turns will be allowed from the site onto Randolph Avenue. We haven't done an alternatives analysis in terms of if there's right turn only, where do those vehicles go? And where would they end up, and what does that mean for traffic on local streets? We have not done that, and again, we haven't done that because we're expecting Mass DOT to give us full access.
And with due respect to our neighbors in Spafford, Buckingham, and Martin, there's something to be said for the proximity to the site that we believe the impact on us will be far greater, so thank you. So any
do you have any, without having done the study, do you have any inferences or estimations that you could draw as to the impact of the traffic conditions on Clifton if?
I don't know what's there today in terms of volume. I don't know what's there today in terms of speed. So, order of magnitude, are we talking about all of the vehicles that if you went right out only, are all of those vehicles going down Clifton? Question mark. It's something we could look at. Traffic is like water. It seeks its own level.
Plus the hospice, once it's open and operational, it's only 15, 20 cars or whatever, but.
And if there's a less restrictive route, people are going to find it. And we know that. And when congestion happens, people choose other routes. So I can't speak to what would happen on Clifton right now because we have not studied it.
Mrs. Smith?
That route, though, is going up Reed Street, Highland, and Clifton is the tightest turnaround for that right-hand turn, or not being able to make the left-hand turn, so it's an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And, yes, sir. Oh, yes, ma'am. Please, come on up. You can only see the top of your head. Well, just take your
My
time.
name is Virginia Carroll. I live at 403 Highland Street. I've lived there for 82 years. I think I know the general situation. If I go out of my driveway, I have to go down Highland Street to Randolph Avenue. It's one way, I cannot go up. I've been spoken to by the police over the years trying to do it. But anyways, and if I go down the end of the street and take a left, this is what these people are going to be coming into. I know. And people that come down Highland Street, they come up behind me and they start blowing their horn.
Are
And
you driving a Ferrari or a Porsche or some?
I've got a Porsche.
A Porsche?
Porsche,
Oh, how
a
nice.
pink one.
A pink one.
And if I go to East Milton or somewhere, in order to get back to my home, I have to go up Clifton, Spafford. They're all do not enter from 7 to 9. All 3 roads beyond me. So if somebody comes out of this place and wants to take a right, they can't take another right till they get to Hillside Street. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and being brave enough to speak. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mike Fitzsimons. I live at 214 Highland Street, which is basically ground zero for where the traffic that is inevitably going to turn right, just because people kind of get the ability to turn on the left-hand side. Just as she recently said, many of them are going to take a turn on right and come down our road. It's already a road that's in very poor condition. People speed down this road all the time.
Is it Captain Brook? Is it 214 Highland
Where is
Street?
214?
Where is 214 in
At the corner
relation to the
of corner of
project?
Highland and Clifton. And they're not going to go down to Martin. They're going to take a right on Clifton Ave. Okay, and the road there is filled with children, and it's going to continue to be filled with children. And I'm very concerned that kids don't seem to be coming up in this conversation at all, in any of these that I've been to, and I've been to virtually all of them. Where are they going to wait for school buses? Are they going to wait down on Reedsdale Road? Or is a bus going to come up into this development? And we've already talked about it being difficult to turn around to pick up the children up there. And the other thing is, there's been 4 fatalities already. There's no doubt, and you can't deny this, that kids are going to be killed going across that street to go over to Bent's to get a cookie or to go up to Tedeschi to get an ice cream. And that's going to happen. There's no doubt. In fact, the individual that we bought the house from, he was hit by a car and forced him to retire. And he was in the hospital in critical care for weeks. And there's plenty of stories out there. But what concerns me the most is children here. And I really don't see much thought actually going into that. And we talk about 28 people leaving to go to work. We're talking them going into Boston. Parents are going to be driving their kids down to the school. Again, we haven't even talked about the impact on the schools yet, but parents are going to be leaving. So between 7 and 8, it's going to be people going to work. Between 7:30 and 8:30, they're going to be going to the school. And the other thing is people that do take the right are going to be taking that illegal left down Pleasant Ave, turning into oncoming traffic. And that doesn't seem to be haven't been talked about. So I think that traffic is a real issue here. And at the house that I am at, and I have children there, and unfortunately kids, they're going to end up out in the street. And I don't want that to be considered my fault, because we're going to add a lot of traffic, and I'm very concerned as what's going to happen. But I can tell you, if this development goes in there, there will be a dead child in a short period of time.
I appreciate your comments. Do you have any questions you want to ask, Mr. Zaleski?
I think that the last issue that was brought up is, we keep talking about this neighborhood, okay? And I would hope that a study would actually be done, and I'm concerned why wasn't a study done of Highland, just with the assumption that they're going to get the ability to turn onto the left? I mean, that's part of the neighborhood we're putting this in. This development is going into a neighborhood, not an isolated place where nobody's located.
Let me ask, thank you very much, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Sure you can. Mr. Fitzsimmons, or?
So can I just ask you a question on what you were talking about the
So you'll have to come back here, please. Thank you.
illegal left on Pleasant? Could you go through that and what we?
I believe that, and I may be wrong, the exit may be further down actually than Pleasant Ave, but going by Bent's there,
Yeah.
I think I was driving down it the other day, and, it is possible that the angle in which you'd be going by Bent's requires a pretty severe turn to get up to Bent's. I'm not even sure if it's actually legal or not.
I think it's a one-way north, isn't it?
It probably is a one-way north.
It is.
So if you'd be taking the way down, if you'd be coming south, you'd be
Oh,
taking
you'd be
a
going
left.
south and taking a left to go to Bent's.
Yeah,
Oh, I
but
see.
I could
Okay,
be
so
wrong.
yeah, that's before the driveway.
So then
Yeah,
that wouldn't
That's
be-
actually there was testimony on that's where some of the missing traffic was going, that was going by the site, not getting to the light at the church. It was scooting over by Bent's to head over to Cunningham. That's basically what I,
Yeah, no, I think I was mistaken.
yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to understand what you were saying.
And I guess the last thing I'd say is, it's not just 80-year-olds who don't take a left there. I would bet that pretty much everyone in our neighborhood avoids taking a left
Yeah,
out
'cause they're
there on
smart.
any of those,
Yeah.
going through that area. They all go to that, they all go to the corner right there at St. Elizabeth's.
While we have you, can we talk a little bit about school buses in the neighborhood? So this is Cunningham?
Cunningham, yeah.
And is there a bus stop near your house?
Right, bus stop is pretty much about 2/3 of the way up the road towards Highland Ave. And there's two next year. there'll be-
Up Clifton.
Up
It stops
Clifton.
on Clifton.
It stops on Clifton.
Does it stop on Highland at all?
I am unaware of it stopping on Highland. I don't believe so, because children from Highland actually come to Clifton.
Does the bus go up and down the ladder streets in the morning?
I believe that it zigzags up and down Highland and Martin and those, but I don't know beyond Clifton.
Does, yeah. So,
Your school and the high school.
two different buses. And what's the volume? Do you know? Do you have
I
any
mean, if you
idea?
walk down in the morning, you have my two daughters, you have two other little girls, you have two children, and probably in 2 years there'll be three children there. You have two others, and then another nine or 10 virtually every day.
So this is not a fair question to you. You have no idea the answer to this, but I think it would be helpful to understand and maybe you guys would know this, or maybe the town would know it. Would there be arrangements for the school bus to stop in this area to pick up children? Yes.
The Cunningham bus picked up my daughter in front of his house.
In front of his house, but what?
Yes, at the corner of Clifton and Highland, you have the yellow house? My daughter used to wait right outside
Yeah.
his door for the bus.
But what about the students who are going to live in these units? Where are they going to get the bus? It's my question.
Sorry.
No one in this room will know.
No, I didn't think that anyone would.
But Jeffrey, my memory is, and correct me, Mr. Delaski, my memory is there was evidence that the school bus, in order to board students residing at this complex, would have to pull onto the access road and not board students by stopping in Randolph Avenue.
They do the same turnaround as the fire truck would do.
Yeah, they can't stop on Randolph. That was what the police chief said.
Okay.
So the turnaround and then back up and then come out. And that backup, with the backup that we talked about, are we assuming there's actually cars there or there's not cars there?
It's the Hammer lot over on the left-hand side of the building, is what the applicant has said, where the bus would turn around.
And if between 7 and 9, those buses couldn't turn left based on the no left turn, so they'd come to Clifton.
Where the kids are waiting for a bus.
Yes.
So in other words, the boarding of the bus would be internal to the site, the problem being that it may block the road just a little bit, and then they would have to go into the site, turn around, back up, come out of the site, which may take some additional time. But that's the way it would have to be, because it's illegal, I think, to park on Randolph Avenue and board students. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Actually, I think we should add buses. It's not just one bus. I would assume there'd be buses for the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school.
Well, that depends on a review of the mix of the apartments that are part of the complex here. Yes, sir. It's now about 3 minutes of 8, so we'll hear from this gentleman, then we're going to adjourn.
quick.
No, take your time. Hold on. Then we're going to adjourn until the 20th at 7:30. Tell us your name and address, sir.
Michael Murray, I live on Clifton Road as well, 40 Clifton, right across from them.
I'm sorry, people were whispering to me. And they couldn't.
40
Is it
Clifton
Michael Murray?
Yes,
And where do you live?
40 Clifton Road.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
My question was, where there was no study done, you said that you guys did no study of Clifton Road. Has the city of Milton, because I think we can all tell you what's probably going to happen if the developer does the study. We want to know what the city, has the city looked at this? And a second question that just came up when you were talking about the traffic. If we're going to go with you can make a left-hand turn, does anyone actually think it's safe for a school bus to make a left-hand turn at 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday? Come on.
That sounds like an excellent question for Mr. Dulaski. Do you want to answer that question, Dan?
Is it safe for a school bus to make that left-hand turn?
According to the police chief, there's a queue that's there all day long, so to pull out into that queue would be, a courtesy versus a requirement. In terms of executing that turn, all right, so you look at school bus, you look at a school bus driver. That school bus driver is going to wait for an acceptable gap. And at some point, either that gap is going to exist or that gap is not going to exist, and that school bus driver is going to either wait for that left or forego that left and do something else.
And I guess our issue is to forego that left means going around and creating more traffic and more cars going fast down our street, which I would like to say, I mean, we have, aside from the amount of school kids, just in the 5 houses next to me, we have 7 or 8 kids under the school age right now that are between 1 and 6 right now, and it's not great in the morning as it is now. And so we'd like to know if the city has looked at this more than anyone else.
I think that the town, I don't believe, has included that in its study of the project.
Thank you.
I don't believe that has happened. Good. Thank you very much, sir. Mary, you were whispering something to me.
The meeting on the 20th at 5.
It's at 5 o'clock, yes. Okay, so folks, thanks for coming tonight. We're going to have another engineering study by the people at Rackham, Sawyer and Brewster on traffic, engineering, wetlands on the 20th. And we're meeting at 5 o'clock, and that's going to be at the Blue Conference Room right here. And 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, everyone? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. 20th is at 5 p.m.
Is that a Saturday or?
No, it's a Wednesday.
May 20th.
Wednesday, the 20th at 5 p.m. here. So we'll be adjourned. Thanks for coming, folks.